Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. We're delighted to be here to share our presentation and our thoughts and perspective on such an important topic, which is student debt relief. What's next, what's new, and why student loan repayment solutions should be part of a comprehensive financial wellness program. My name's Amy Bruce. I'm the head of financial wellness at UBS, and I'm joined by Nick Ferdon. He is VP of Sales and Partnerships with Future Fuel. Nick, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Amy, thank you so much. And yes, it's great to see everyone. Good afternoon. And we're thrilled as well to be here. Speaking about something that we're as passionate about as student loan debt, supporting millions of Americans who are holding this debt, and what's changing in the landscape to help support them moving forward. This is such an exciting conversation that we're thrilled to be a part of. I'd also like to introduce Michael Stockwell, who's our Chief Adoption Officer. Michael is joining us and will be available to help answer any questions on the live Q&A. So thank you so much again, and we're excited to get started.
That's great. Thank you both. So Nick, you represent a company whose sole mission is to help millions of American workers manage and ultimately pay down their student debt. Can you just give us a quick overview and some additional insights into exactly what Future Fuel does?
Absolutely. Yeah, and at Future Fuel, our goal is simple. We really want to help employees crush their student debt, and not only crush their student debt, but by partnering with leaders like UBS out there, we want to help them crush that debt so that they can then ultimately build wealth and get out of this debt that has become really one of the largest forms of debt in the United States. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about the things that are happening in the world, the problems that are going on, and what's going to help support the employees moving forward.
That's great. And Nick, this seems like such a timely moment to talk about this topic. It feels very much like, student debt is front and center. We hear about it a lot in the news, in the workplace. Can you just share a little bit more on the current landscape and why this topic is so relevant right now at this point in time?
Well, you're exactly right, Amy. And if we just take a look at the problem, you can see why. Student debt now is the second largest form of debt in the United States, and it's only behind mortgages now. Unfortunately, it's also the fastest growing, really by far. It's growing over $100 billion year over year in the United States. And what we've seen is that student debt is not siloed at all. And that's why it's become such a hot topic, is because of the ripple effects that student debt can have on an employee's lives. And if you just think about it, it's delaying life events such as getting married, buying a home, having kids. And, Amy, I'm sure like overseeing broader financial wellness as a whole, I'm sure you're seeing how much it even impacts the financial side of an employee's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we like to think about financial wellness in the same way that we would think about mental health and physical well-being. There are a number of different areas within an individual's life that can cause them stress, and can really impact their ability to think about and plan accordingly for the future. So clearly student debt and debt in general, is one of those areas, and certainly an area that we've found to be really impactful when we can work with employees through our financial wellness program, paying down student debt, and just the overall sense of achievement and relief that individuals feel when they're able to do that is really, really valuable and so impactful to people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the reality that we face today is it's under a microscope even more. And that financial health has really only become more difficult in the last 2 years with COVID. I'm sure, there's some really impactful statistics that you've been seeing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been an incredibly difficult time for all of us in a number of different ways. And I think the impact on financial health has obviously been huge. Some of the numbers here speak for themselves. 33% of Americans have lost income. 41% started carrying or adding to the balance on their credit card, and 14% have borrowed money from friends and family. So clearly those numbers only re-emphasize the need for help, right? For people to obtain help, and to obtain that help through their employer is tremendous. One of the other interesting things that we discovered in a recent piece of research that we did was that the pandemic has had a much less positive impact on women than on women's finances than it has on men's finances. So with that gender lens in mind, because we know that diversity and inclusion is clearly a very important topic and front and center at of a lot of minds, and certainly from an employer's perspective. Could you maybe share a little bit about how student debt is a deterrent to diversity and what you're seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, and it's such a good point, because if you thinking about it that way, it's actually really one of the key reasons, diversity, equity, and inclusion, why employers are seeing the need to offer a benefit like this. From a D&I lens, 67% of all student debt is held by women or persons of color. And those who hold student debt are then 2 times less likely to enroll in other financial wellness offerings, to enroll in 401k or retirement. And so what that means is people just are not on the same playing field. And by offering student debt, helping those get out of debt faster, is really building a more equitable employer workforce, which is what everybody is trying to accomplish now, which is so great to see that it's really resonating with employers.
Absolutely. And just a final point on, this topic in the wake of COVID, we've also seen this shift from financial wellness and well-being programs being pre-pandemic considered as more of a nice to have. And now kind of 18 months into this pandemic, we're seeing that financial wellness programs are more of a must-have. And that shift has been really quite dramatic over such a short space of time. But employers are really thinking now more holistically about their well-being strategy, because the expectations of employees have really changed over that period of time.
Yeah, and going back to the retirement piece, I was just mentioning there how, those people who hold debt are 2 times less likely to contribute to other investment vehicles or retirement. This has a direct impact, and that's really what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I mean, this number is really quite shocking, really. But it goes back to the point that historically, I think when we thought about financial wellness programs more holistically, really we only thought about them in the context of retirement, of this topic. But I think now what employers are starting to recognize more is that people need more help with the day-to-day. Because it's really the day-to-day, such as paying off student debt, is really holding them back from being able to think longer term about retirement and planning for their future. So clearly, as a financial wellness provider, that's what we hope to be able to do. We hope to be able to help people with their day-to-day, paying down their debt, managing to their budget, etc., so that they can really then take advantage of retirement contributions, etc., whatever it may be. But most importantly, so that they can start to plan and look to the future and feel good about things.
Yeah, and one last piece I'll mention here is nearly 3 out of 4, so 73% of borrowers report that they're putting off maximizing their retirement savings. And it's saying that it's a direct correlation to that they expect to begin or increase their contributions once their student loans are paid off. So this is really the core reason why people aren't doing, what everybody is told to do, right? Maximize your 401k, get the most out of these retirement savings. If a company is offering a match, you need to take advantage. These employees agree. It's not that they don't understand, it's that they just financially, physically are not able to do so.
Yeah, and it's such a shame, because there's money being in many cases there's money being left on the table from the employer, in company matches that to your point, people are just not able to take advantage of. And if you can't take advantage of something, can you really see the true value of that benefit in itself? Which, I would question. You probably can't if you're so bogged down with student debt, and that's as far as you can see.
Right. And it's such a great transition into this, which is student debt, I think sometimes is almost misnamed because student debt can sort of imply that it's younger people who are dealing with it. And going back to our previous slide on retirement, a lot of people then might have the assumption that, okay, the people who aren't able to contribute to retirement are maybe the younger people because they're the only ones holding debt. That's just truly not the case. And you and I were actually talking about this slide before, and just how unfortunate but amazing this is that student debt is age agnostic. We've just recently released several case studies that are showing that employers who are offering a benefit have actually found that the average age of employee holding debt is sometimes between 38 to 42 years old on an average.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. Really surprised. And, I always had the assumption that student debt was an individual thing, right? So student debt was all, it was my student debt, as opposed to it was maybe debt that I'm holding for other people, which you were able to share some, shed some light on that.
Exactly. And it's not just student debt, it's mom debt, it's dad debt, grandparent debt, spousal debt, and uncle debt. So it truly, like, it does not see age in that sense. And if you think about it too, the average time it takes to pay down a loan is typically between like 18 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And so you're holding this debt and then oftentimes getting back into it.
Yeah, and to think about the moments during that period of time where you are holding off on other things, right? Which you mentioned earlier in the presentation, where you're not able to contribute to retirement, or you're putting off purchasing a house, whatever it may be. All of the moments where you may have missed out because you're carrying all of this debt.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And last thing I'll say on this slide is, because this is impacting all ages, is why it's really become such a popular benefit. Employers are realizing that to be hyper competitive and to separate themselves and to offer the leading benefits, they're needing to offer what's coming up. And this is something that's coming up for all ages. And Amy, I'll pass it over to you here, because you're seeing this firsthand, but hiring has really never been more competitive than it is today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My background is actually in HR. I spent 10 years in HR, and I think probably what we're seeing now, in terms of just quite how competitive the landscape is from a talent, attraction and retention perspective, is really quite something. We have record numbers of people leaving the workforce right now. And many of them actually don't have other jobs lined up, which is really interesting. For those that do have other jobs lined up, there are some probably unsurprising things that are attracting them to their new roles in terms of increased flexibility, work-life balance, remote working. I think a lot of us have been become accustomed to a number of those things during the pandemic, and employees are really seeking that out in their next employment. But obviously benefits and what a company is offering from an overall well-being perspective is becoming more and more important, and something that employees are increasingly focusing on. Clearly, this war on talent, if you like, is very costly for an employer. And given that we see here just quite how mobile millennials are, and millennials make up, the vast majority of the workforce today, with an average churn of 15 months, as you can see on the slide there, to think that you're having to refill a seat after 15 months is quite a headache from an employer's perspective. So what we're seeing more broadly from a benefits perspective is that employers can no longer just rely on benchmarking their pay and reward benefits, learning and development, well-being offerings to the median. They're now having to think a lot more strategically, and are having to evolve and stay relevant. So they need to understand what their employees are actually wanting and what they will actually value. And when they do this, employees are expecting them to do it with authenticity and compassion, given a lot of what we've been through over the past 18 months, and that they take action. So they want to see that their employer is in touch with their needs by taking action. And one of the ways that they can take action is through the benefits that they offer. So if we just take a look at some of the points here, in terms of putting ourselves in the shoes of employees. And I'm sure a lot of us this afternoon can relate to these points. Student debt is the #1 financial concern and distraction. So from an employee's perspective, clearly that's very stressful. From an employer's perspective, your people are not at their best if they're distracted and have stress, so clearly this is a big driver of that at this moment in time. And then if you look at the stat below, so 63% have no one to talk about their student debt to. One thing that we see with our financial wellness program is the human element of our program is what we see as one of the most valuable, because having the ability to pick up the phone and speak to a financial wellness coach really goes a long way. Digital tools and resources and education is all incredibly helpful, but the human element of being able to have a one-to-one conversation with somebody who has expertise in your area and understands your perspective is extremely valuable. And then just to kind of pick up a little bit on the employer reality there, we talked about the 15 months of employee retention, but 87% of organizations report retention as a critical priority. Again, not surprising given the environment that we're in right now. And, really just further highlights why there is so much emphasis and so much focus right now on benefits.
Exactly. And the piece I'll say on the student loan side is, fortunately, employers are hearing what's being said from employees. And, these stats just show the importance of retention now more than ever, as you were mentioning. Student loan itself is now a top 3 most asked about benefit from employees. And so as this hypermobility has become the norm, as this kind of dynamic has shifted in this new landscape for the employer and employee relationship, employers need to adjust what their benefits packages are. And we actually saw a statistic that shows that over 80% of HR leaders have already announced that they're going to be completely relooking at their benefit scope and what they're offering to employees as the world has shifted to make sure that they're offering the best and the most leading benefits out there. Student loan is quickly becoming one of the most talked about ones.
Absolutely. So what are we doing about it? Aside from obviously offering these great programs, which is within our control, I know that your company has been working closely with Congress to raise awareness and, help them find practical solutions that would combine private and public resources. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think obviously this is where, we really hopefully start to see some change.
Exactly. And, as much as we've looked at this is a problem, the fortunate thing here that we can talk about is that it is being addressed, and it is kind of agreed upon really on both sides of the party that this does need to be addressed. And so I wanted to actually take a step back at this timeline, which I think is just really powerful to show what's going on, because we're actually in January of 2022, we're going to be facing really the largest debt upheaval in US history here. And the fortunate thing is that there is things that are being done. And, as you had mentioned, our CEO, Laurel Taylor, has really been on the front lines of understanding, what legislation is out there, helping, being on the Hill to ensure that these bills are being passed. And if you look at what's going on here in January, we're facing 2 really key things. One is that at the end of January, payment suspension is going to be ending. There's 30 million borrowers that are now going to have to refund that $500 that they've probably repurposed for the last 2 years, probably going towards groceries, going towards rent, supporting their family, children. Those $500 are going to have to go back towards student debt. And millions of Americans really don't know where they're going to be getting that right now. On top of that, you're also facing the fact that many of these loan servicers are going to be changing contracts with the government in January, and 10 million borrowers are going to have to be switching servicers. This alone is just going to provide a lot of confusion to Americans on having to navigate through this, having to understand when payment suspension ends and their borrower has shifted. They're being left in the dark. And so fortunately, there's a lot that's being done here to help support employees. One of the most exciting ones is the CAA, which has already passed, which I'll talk about here in the next slide. But upcoming, we have the Secure Act 2.0. And this is one of the hottest topics, which I'm sure you've even been hearing.
Yeah, exactly. And Nick, how likely is it that you think that that's going to be passed?
Yeah, it's what we've actually seen is there have been some major wins already, which is great to see. So the first round of this was already passed by the Ways and Means Committee earlier this year. It's actually unanimously passed. So again, we are seeing that just everybody is in agreement that student loan debt needs to be addressed. What we're seeing is that we are expecting in the first half of 2022 that this should pass.
Great. And for everybody joining us this afternoon, maybe just quickly, high level, what that will mean for people with student debt.
Yeah, it's what this is going to mean is basically, what they're trying to do with both of these, with the CAA and with the Secure Act 2.0, is we're trying to come up with ways to support employees who, again, are facing this weight of student debt. What the CAA and the Secure Act does is find ways to make sure that they're being set up for their future, either faster or being set up with retirement, which is what the Secure Act touches on.
Okay.
So I'll start with the CAA, which has already passed. It passed earlier this year in January and has already had major excitement from employers to be offering. So as of today, employers are able to offer $5,250 in pre-tax contributions to help employees pay down their student debt. This used to always just be towards tuition assistance. And then recently in January, it's expanded into those pre-tax dollars being able to go towards paying down student debt. What's really exciting about that is over 70% of employers actually have already allocated a budget towards this. With tuition assistance, they have wanted to help offer this to employees. They do want to help support their employees in growth. And so over 70% of employers already have a budget for this. 92% of that budget has actually been going unused right now.
Which is just amazing that it's such a high number.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And, what we've seen actually is almost the exact opposite when people are getting offered the student loan repayment piece of this. So when employers are offering this contribution towards student loan repayment, we're actually seeing upwards of 98% engagement and usage of those dollars. It's huge, and it can vary on what's being offered to the employee with that $5,250. Of course, employers do not have to max out. They can start with a $50 a month budget, $100 a month per employee who's eligible, but that can have massive wins. And we'll talk a little bit later just about the statistics showing that employees are asking about this, and when they're getting something like this, they're staying with those employers longer. Now, talking about the Secure Act 2.0, this one is incredibly exciting. We were just talking about just the buzz that this already has, talking about how this has already passed through the Ways and Means Committee. We've talked about how this should be passing in 2022, but let's actually look at what it means. So we've talked about how employees are 2 times less likely to participate in things like a 401k if they do hold student debt. What the Secure Act is doing is addressing those employees. So with the Secure Act 2.0, if you hold student debt, and if you're in good standing with your student debt, meaning you're paying off your monthly payments each month, you're in good standing with your servicer, you're actually now going to be eligible for your employer's 401k match, even if you're not able to participate in the 401k plan. And like what we just talked about, that's what's happening to the majority of these Americans. We're looking at most of these Americans can't do both. They have to choose one or the other. This is just such an unbelievable bill that's saying that, hey, we hear you. We know that you can't participate in this. We're still going to help you save for your retirement later.
Yeah. And going back to the point, we talked about earlier in terms of seeing the value of the benefits that your employer offers. Previously for folks who couldn't contribute to a 401k because they were so bogged down with student debt and therefore not really seeing the benefit or the value of a company match, that kind of goes away now because they're going to be able to still see the value despite the fact that they're maybe not in a position yet to start contributing.
Exactly. And I think that it's just great to see that, this is that employees are being heard. And
Yeah.
this is just going to show that all of these statistics that we're seeing are they truly are bad, right? Like the statistics that employees aren't able to participate in these life events, they're not able to save for retirement. It's going to be delaying when they can retire. This is addressing that head on, and it's just really great to see that it's being heard.
Absolutely.
And just rounding this out, Amy, like what we're seeing is that, again, it is what employees want. And going back to just the slide that you were talking about, this is a new world. It's a new territory where this is one of the most aggressive and competitive hiring markets of all time. And if it's what employees are asking for, let's make sure that we can get it. And, back to you on this, you're seeing this rolling up and supporting the overall and broader financial wellness scope. Like, what are you guys seeing today with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did a fairly recent study where one of the pieces that was quite interesting was, and this was in relation to millennials, which obviously make up a lot of the workforce today, that they were viewing financial wellness in the same way that they were viewing mental health and physical wellness. They were seeing all three as equally as important, right, in the context of what employers are offering from a benefits perspective. But what was interesting is when we looked at how that has changed over time, that sentiment had really kind of rapidly increased as it relates to financial wellness. So we know, we hear this all the time. This is something that employees are expecting now, right? They feel their employer has a responsibility to provide them with more holistic support in these areas. And also specifically on the student loan front, we saw that 38% viewed it as being highly important that their company provides student loan assistance. So, we know that student loans is just one piece of the bigger financial wellness picture, but clearly for those that have student debt, it's a very important piece. And when we think about each of the elements that you've got here on this slide, from a retention, acquisition, diversity, and employee engagement perspective, when we work with clients on delivering our financial wellness program to their employees, if we could achieve improvement in all four of these areas, then we have absolutely done our job, and ultimately that is what we're striving for. And if we can do that, then I think we start to see the benefits of those employees who really value the place that they turn up to every day and work incredibly hard for. So it's very much a win-win situation for both the employer and the employee.
It really is, right? I mean, I just think, how great is it that employees are more empowered than ever, and now they're being heard, and now these benefits are going to address their problems head on. I think it's a great shift in the dynamic there, and employees are being heard, and we want to help make sure that they're being supported. So I think it's fantastic.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. So,
all right.
Yeah, that's a wrap. Hey, Nick. So thank you everybody for joining. And we're going to move into Q&A for the next part of the session.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Amy. And thanks everybody. We're so excited to be speaking about this.